All right. Looks like we're online, Brett, for the first episode of Strong Opinions Loosely Held. It's been an interesting journey to get here. But look, I'm really privileged to have you on board and share a small amount of your evening with me, knowing you're a busy man in that. But how about you give yourself a bit of a brief intro
A brief intro.
and let people know who you are, what you're about, and what you're up
Yeah,
to.
sure. So thanks, mate. It's good to be here. And you know me, I've got an opinion or two, so this could or should be fun, I hope. So a bit about me. Started my career as an avionics engineer with Air New Zealand a long time ago. While I was there, accidentally got into some IT stuff and enjoyed it, software development, some other things. Left there in the 90s, went and joined a company selling IT stuff, products and services. Um, and in 1997, I joined Microsoft here in New Zealand, spent 13 years there, learned a hell of a lot. One of the best things ever happened to me career-wise. Left in 2010, and since then started my own consulting business with a very good friend of mine, Alex Broughton. Ran a digital agency here in Tauranga called Cucumber.
Yep.
Spent 4.5 years running at one stage a team of about 100 and something folks at Datacom, which is quite an amazing company. And in between there, I've done a couple of stints at Callaghan Innovation, and left Callaghan March this year. And right now I'm technically self-employed. I co-own a CNC manufacturing business based in East Tamaki, which I'm woefully untrained and ill prepared for, and it's a great learning experience. So yeah, that's kind of my CV in a nutshell.
Oh, look, it's interesting. Some of your path is similar to mine, and getting into technology was more of an accident
Yeah, definitely that.
than a career choice. I was wanting to be a lawyer. Far out.
Yeah, that was almost what happened to me. I applied to Air New Zealand to be an avionics engineering apprentice, and I applied to Auckland University Law School, and I got the acceptance letter from Air New Zealand the day before the one came from Auckland University. Thank God.
Oh yeah,
Just
yeah.
imagine what might have been. Oh God, terrifying thought.
I could imagine us probably going toe to toe in a court and having strong opinions.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
true. That's true.
Perhaps as a
Maybe I'll go
lawyer,
and do
not.
that next. Let's go and do that next, eh?
Yeah, they might not be so loosely held though, mate. When the stakes are high.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Um, what appealed to you coming on? You know, we've known each other for a while. And we've kept in touch sporadically more
Yep.
recently, a bit more regularly. But in terms of jumping on, and what are you hoping to share with the audience that I'm
I
looking to
I
build?
I actually have no idea. I like the premise though. Like I've used the term strong opinions loosely held for years, right? And because
Mm,
it's an ethos I like. One of the most important things that's probably ever happened to me career wise, and certainly at the time, sometimes some of the most humbling things was working for a company like Microsoft, where I was, everyone else was smarter than me. I mean,
mm.
it's an incredibly smart company, and there was
Oh,
more than a few times where I'd walk into a room with a pretty firmly held opinion about something. This is what we should do. This is the state of play. This is where things are at. And I would walk out with that flip through 180 degrees because I was in a room with a whole bunch of people who saw things in a different way, had different viewpoints. There were things that I didn't know of at the time. Um, and at first, when you have that kind of, this is how we're going to do it, and when you walk out of the room, we're going to be doing it exactly the opposite way, that's a little bit humbling. And it's a little bit humbling because you take your ego into the conversation, right? And I think what I learned
oh
was
yeah.
you leave your ego at the door, and when presented with information that should and could cause you to change your mind, then maybe you probably should. And so and it's something that I think our politicians could learn a lot from, and they always get accused of flip flopping, but, there's a great T-shirt I saw a while back, and it said something along the lines of, "When presented with different evidence or different information, I change my viewpoint or I change my opinion. Why don't you or don't you?" And I think it's important. I think we're in a world these days with We're swamped with information. It's very easy to have a lot of information, but still not all of the information.
Mm.
Um, we're we're humans, and we have a tendency. It's just how we're wired to form viewpoints and judgments and opinions. And I think it's important, if you're going to do that, and anyone that knows me will tell you I've got an opinion or three, to be willing to change them when presented with evidence that says you should. So that's why.
Yeah, yeah, and look, it sort of rings true for me. There's a level of authenticity to it, and having a conversation. I hate using words like that because actually I want to see a behaviour that leads someone to think you're authentic rather than saying, oh, "Look at me, I'm authentic."
Yeah, yeah,
But it harks back to, and I can never remember the name of the prime minister of Egypt back in the 50s, where wouldn't have peace talks and all of that, and and made the choice to jump in, got some new information by going to those, and completely changed the trajectory of
yep,
some of that stuff going on in a political sense back then.
yeah.
Hey, look, like me, you've obviously liked some shiny shit too in terms of the technology. So, leadership and technology, how do you look at those things in the context of um, the nature of the podcast and strong opinions? Because there are so many ways you can hold them in this
Yeah,
game.
yeah, that's true. Look, I think leadership's interesting. I can't remember. I think it might have been while I was at Microsoft doing some skills training of some sort, and someone saying, um, you shouldn't kind of wake up one day and find yourself in a position of leadership. You need to consciously step into it, or be conscious of the fact that you are a leader, or viewed as a leader. And that took me a while to cotton on to, and I certainly don't see myself as a leader, capitals bold, underlined.
Mm.
Um, but I know that there are folks that might seek my opinion on things, and it took me a little while to click to that. Might be a little bit of imposter syndrome. In fact, be honest and upfront and say that I'm a terminal sufferer of imposter syndrome.
Mm.
Um, it was interesting. We had a offsite while I was at, I don't think this is talking in school, while I was at Callaghan Innovation. A whole bunch of my peers, we went around the table at the end, and someone brought up the topic of imposter syndrome, and literally everyone around that table, and these are really smart people, um, suffered from it or had suffered from it, which was interesting. But so from a leadership perspective, I don't know whether it's necessarily technologically bound, but I've kind of over the years mentored a lot of folks. I've led some teams, a couple of them, fairly decent sizes. Learned a lot along the way. Made a bunch of mistakes. Got some things right. But I think, yeah, leadership's critical. And I think in times, particularly these sorts of times where there's a fair bit of chaos, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of change, a lot of danger of folks being left behind. I think
Yeah.
good leadership's more important than ever, right? And I'm not sure that we've cracked the nut yet on how to create good leaders. There is still, and you and I could swap all sorts of war stories. There's some pretty shitty leaders out there in the tech space, right? There's some incredibly good leaders as well, but I've seen certainly my fair share of those type A crazies over the years. But
Yeah,
like to think I'm not one of those.
well, I don't think you are, Brett. So
Phew.
one vote. As long as you reciprocate that,
Excellent,
mate, and
excellent. Yeah, no.
we're on equal footing.
Yep,
But look, you're right. My observation is that leadership isn't something that you should just fall into. I think you have to be intentional about it
yeah,
and want to do it. I've seen so many people promoted into a management role or think it's the next thing in management leadership. Interchangeable word for the purpose of this
yep,
hour long or however we can hold breath for. Um, but there are people and they arrive and they don't really want to be there. And often it's the most successful person in the team. The most successful salesperson gets made the sales manager and
yep,
sales tank.
yep.
Like, I don't know how many times I saw that pattern, right? And
Look,
it's the
I saw
same in
that
tech.
while I was an aircraft engineer. That, in fact, I remember someone saying to me, "A good engineer does not a good manager make,"
Mm.
and that was the first time I'd ever kind of seen the phenomenon. But that was 100,000 years ago. So the issue, the situation's been around since forever, right? And I think people keep still making that fundamental mistake. And I think if I think about where things were back then, I think where things are now, from the point of view of thinking about authenticity and EQ and humanity and ability to interact with humans and interpersonal skills and that sort of stuff, we're a lot more tuned in to the importance of those things. But you still see organizations making exactly the mistake you described, right? Oh, this person's very good at that particular role. We will put them into a role managing lots of other people doing that role. Oh, this isn't working. Well, this is a great surprise to us. We can't work out
Yeah,
what's gone wrong.
wasn't in the textbook.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Look, in that context, even because I took some time out of tech, if you don't know, and bought some CrossFit gyms. I have always kind of had this passion for fitness, although if you saw me from the chest down, you might not think so at the moment.
You
But
and me both, mate.
um, this is going somewhere in terms of there was some accusations leveled at me because I wasn't the best athlete in the gym, so how could I coach others? And I just go back to, well, did Sir Ted ever play for the All Blacks?
Yeah, that's right.
So to see good and potential in others doesn't mean you have to be, have that potential or those skills yourself. You just
Yep.
have to believe that you can see it, right? And I think fundamentally, if I was telling myself as a 20-year-old or 25 or 30-year-old aspiring to be a manager and leader, I'd be looking at how you develop and recognise in others. What are your thoughts, or what would be one thing that you'd tell your 30-year-old self going into his
Yeah,
first
look, I think
leadership role?
the thing that I have learned over the years about me is that I have seen enough examples where I have seen the talent or the potential within people and been able to tease that out of them over time via coaching or mentoring or whatever it might be, and that's worked. That talent that I thought was there, and those people have gone on to great things. I've done that enough times to know that I think I might have a knack for that. Um, you can talk to anyone that's ever worked for me and they'll give you the downside of me as a leader. I can be random at times. I remember one of the best pieces of feedback I ever got. Someone said to me, um, you have great ideas, you come up with great ideas, but you never show us the working. We don't know what's going on inside your brain. Could you communicate more about your thought patterns? And I thought, shit, I hadn't really thought about that. They were exactly right. They were very
Yeah,
right. The other piece of feedback I got years back was that when you get stressed, you get flippant,
yeah,
and they were they were 100% right. But that thing around coaching and mentoring and people, I love people. Like I really like people.
yeah,
I love their stories. I love helping folks. I like learning from them. I like talking, as you're probably discovering. So that I have a genuine love of humanity, of humans, and everyone's got incredible things inside them. And if there's something I can do for somebody to help tease that out or help them see it, sometimes it's just really holding a mirror up and getting them to see themselves the way that I can see them. Then that's a good thing. So
yeah. Look, I recognise that in you. We wouldn't be having this conversation had you and I not spoken a few weeks ago, and you
yeah,
don't even realise you're doing it, right? And here I am taking some action on sharing a message, my own and those of others, which will hopefully help guide some people through some of the silly shit we might have been doing as we were entering into this fray, right? I
yeah.
think that's really important. I heard a Gary V podcast on. There's a group of them. I can't remember the name of the podcast now. It's age. They were like all north of 80, and he said,
Oh yeah,
"You got to keep this going
yeah,
because there's people that are coming behind you that need to hear your story, right? And
yeah.
realizing the potential that can have to positively
Actually,
impact
that
other
and you
people."
raise a really good point too, which is those ahead of you on the journey look like experts to you,
Mm.
or in the know to you, and you look the same to those behind you on the journey. And
Yeah,
um, if you can help those behind you, those following, not step on the landmines you did and into the potholes you have, that's a good thing, right? They'll move more quickly. And I mean, one of the reasons I like doing this is the result, right? But I have benefited from exactly the same thing from so many other people. Um, all the way back to one of my leading hands when I was at Air New Zealand, a guy named Brian Withers, who's the husband of Joan Withers, who's been on the board
Yeah.
of all sorts of things and recently made, I think, a Dame of the Realm or something along those lines. Um, Incredible coach, just to really helped me become a better engineer. And I've all the way through my career, I've worked with people that have been giving of their time and their thoughts and their passion and their willingness to help me become better. And that's the kind of, I don't know, you pay it forward, right? You pay it back and you pay it forward.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like we were just talking before we kind of in the green room before we came on online about
The luxurious green room.
the luxurious green room, like looking at those, not setting boundaries for yourself, but being sort of brave or courageous enough to ask questions and allow others to set the boundaries
Yeah,
for that relationship or that request. Don't be afraid to ask for things. I mean,
yep,
I've lived and died by this in some regards, where if you don't ask, you don't get.
yep.
And whilst that might sound selfish, I don't mean it to be like that. It's you need to have an inquiring or inquisitive mind to
Yeah, oh man, I
be
agree 100%
successful,
with
right?
that. I think curiosity is one of the most important human traits. I think you're not interested in lifting rocks and seeing what lurks underneath, or figuring out how things work or don't work, or why is this broken, or breaking it to find out how it works.
Yeah,
That's I think that those are really important skills. That's how we learn, right? Being inquisitive, constantly curious.
yeah. As that kind of that thought takes me, how do you, as a leader over your time now and previously, how do you create the environment for that to happen?
Yeah,
Give people some agency.
yeah. It's I've done a lot of thinking about this. I've done a lot of talking about this. I do a lot of public speaking and stuff. Um, I think if you kind of bundle this all into around the concept of innovation, I think you've got to give people space to think, right? And I think
Mm.
one of the challenges in the modern workspace is that it's about productivity. It's about churning through things. It's about getting the job done. No one's ever got lots of time on their hands. And I've always believed that productivity and innovation are somewhat mutually exclusive concepts. I think it is hard to be highly productive doing your job and be coming up with brilliant ideas for how to do the job better or make the company better or whatever it might be. And so when I talk to people about innovation, one of the things I say is you need to give people the space to think and to experiment and to learn. And people talk about this fail fast thing, which I've never been a particularly big fan of because the word fail is instantly emotive. Nobody likes the word fail. But if you think about it from a scientific perspective, right, if you have a hypothesis, you have some way of testing that hypothesis, you analyze the results of your testing and you determine whether you've proved the hypothesis true or false. You've learned and then you move on, right? But to do all of that, um, which is how people should and organizations should learn and innovate and experiment and innovate, you need to make the space for it. The mindset that you bring to churning through your job and cranking through and being productive is a different mindset, different headspace than being open-minded, inquisitive, curious, and innovative. So you need to give people the space to do that. And most organizations don't. In fact, one of the things that organizations do a great job of is stomping that out of people. They don't mean to, but it's just the way they operate.
Yeah, I think it's not malintended. It's just kind of a construct of
Correct.
the environment,
It's a
right? And
consequence. Yep.
and it becomes a quite a difficult change opportunity to move the dial, so to speak. It's so funny. There was a chap leaving Aurora when I was at Aurora Energy down here prior to my current role at Silverfern Farms, and his farewell speech, I will remember it to the day I die. He said, "I'm a lazy bugger."
Yep.
But what he was implying, and as he went on to kind of describe to us through a bit of humour, was his laziness led him to be inventive and looking
Yep.
for the better way of doing things, right? Because he didn't want to sit there and tap 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 100 times get the same answer kind of thing. So
Yep.
it's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, it's probably not how I describe myself, but constantly inquiring and challenging the status quo. And I think the objective isn't to be right or change the the outcome necessarily, because of what you were doing is the right thing to do as the group kind of coalesces around, and that's fine too, right? But
Yeah.
you do have to question. How do you deal with the balance of a team? Because not everyone's like that, right?
No, that's right.
And so how do you look at getting the ideal team together and thinking about bringing the diversity and of thought and
Yeah. I mean, that's
perspectives?
hard, right?
Hmm. Say the two
If you
50-year-old white guys.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Um, that really is hard. And like, I'm a massive believer in diversity, and I've seen it. The power of that, the diversity of people, therefore the diversity of thought, um, makes a difference. And I think most organisations have cottoned on to that. I think, although it's still interesting that you look at the IT sector in general, and it tends to be pretty male and
Hmm.
pretty pale.
Hmm.
Um, and I've had lots of conversations with folks over the years about why that is, and people are still trying to figure it out. And I've got some thoughts around that. But I think it comes down to psychological safety. I think that really sits at the center of all of this, right?
Yeah.
And no organization, I would argue, is particularly psychological. There's some exemplars of it, but the reality is most organizations are not, and not even close to being psychologically safe. And if people feel in any way endangered or threatened by not being open and honest and 100% authentic with themselves, their ideas, their thoughts, and all those sorts of things, that means they're holding back. And the minute people are holding back, I think you're not going to have that culture of all that beautiful diversity kind of coming together and coalescing in
Yeah.
some ways. And I've tried really hard over the years to make sure the teams that I was leading, teams I was part of, were psychologically safe. And it's really hard. I remember a really good example while I was at Datacom, where I'd done a lot of thinking about this, and I did everything I could to make this particular team, to provide that safety and make sure that they understood that I would wanted to do this, that it was important, and tell me if this wasn't working. In fact, one of the team members left, resigned, and when she sat down and had a conversation with me, it turned out that the team that we were in, it was fantastic, but actually other parts of the organisation were exhibiting behaviours that were anything else but.
Mm.
And you realise your sphere of influence only goes so far, and that for all the good intentions I had, and hopefully good work that I may have done in some parts, was being negated by other parts of the organisation operating in ways that maybe were nowhere near what I thought they needed to be. But I really do think that psychological safety is right at the heart of this. People need to feel that they can be themselves, um, in a work sense. They don't have to bring all of your political leanings and a whole lot of other stuff to the table at the workplace. But I think from the point of view of feeling that your ideas, your concepts, your way of thinking is valued and of value to the organisation is really important. And again, most organisations, I think, do a pretty rubbish job of that. Their intentions are good. Their results are pretty average. It's just hard to drum that into organisations. There's a really good video um, on YouTube by Professor or Dr. Linda, and her surname will come to me in a second, about the culture at Pixar and how that works, the culture of creativity. And it's an absolute eye opener. And they have created this culture where the newest intern has an equal voice in the big meetings they have to talk about the latest animated movies they're doing with the people that produce Toy Story or something like that. And their CEO has driven that from the top down. So it can be done. It's certainly not easy. It has to be intentional. And of course, just general work stuff gets in the way, right? It's pretty hard to engineer that stuff in when you're busy doing other things as well.
Yeah, it is an interesting, uh, like, no microcosm of things as a whole, right? That work life is a big
Yep,
percentage of your life, right? So
yep, it
that
is.
psychological safety is important. I'm joining a podcast in a few weeks. Stumbled across it in terms of, not stumbled across. I got engaged with. I won't share a name on here, but just talking about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and in particular in technology. I felt compelled to volunteer my time as the poster child of tech, white privileged male, in his 50s
Yeah.
with an education, right? The education's probably not that flat anyway. But the things that I look to lean into, you have to solicit feedback, right? And be open to feedback and understanding
Yeah.
when your behavior isn't kind of fostering those environments and being really conscious of it. Do I get it right every time? No. And anyone that says they do would be lying to you, because we all have biases, right?
Yeah.
And it's really important to challenge and be thinking about those things in ways that isn't condescending, isn't using your position or the privilege that you might have in a way that's not helpful, right? But it is difficult. It's challenging. I think just
Yeah.
keeping. Well, I'll go back to our earlier conversation. Being inquisitive, being inquiring, and don't
Yeah.
go and ask your other 50-year-old white guy mate,
Yeah, that's right.
because you're not going to get the right answer, right? You got
Yeah.
to go and engage with the people that you want to understand and be um, um, sympathetic. Was not. That's not really the
Em-
right word, but
yeah.
empathetic towards.
Em- yeah. I think the feedback thing's really important. Going back to onto the topic of things I found transformative in my career, another one, and again, while I was at Microsoft, was we rolled out feedback training, feedback skills training to
Mm-hmm.
initially the leadership team in New Zealand. And then we were so taken with it, they rolled it out to the leadership team in Australia, and then we all decided we should do this for everyone. So they rolled it out across New Zealand, Australia, up into Asia, and most of the west coast of the United States. It's one of the most powerful things. So I wound up doing it, I think, 3 times.
Mm.
I should have given them feedback that might have been over the top, but it was transformative. It was life changing. It was genuinely life changing. Being taught, because it's a skill very few people I think have naturally, being taught how to sit down and listen to somebody tell you that you had not done the best job of something in a constructive manner that didn't destroy your ego. And again, another reason why learning to leave your ego at the door is a very, very good thing.
Mm.
So to receive that feedback, but also to give that feedback, and to be perfectly honest, the first time we did it, it was a little bit brutal. They dialed it back subsequently, but it was with the leadership team with Microsoft New Zealand, and I was sitting around the table with guys, and there were guys with tears in their eyes. It was
Mm.
hard, right? But it transformed the organization. We learned how to sit and have difficult conversations, and not get bent out of shape and not ruin friendships and working relationships. And every opportunity I get these days, I tell people that if you're looking at doing leadership development for just yourself or for a team or whatever it might be, please, please, please think about doing feedback training, because it's not easy. It's something that you'll remember for the rest of your life for good reasons and bad, but it is transformative.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, perhaps in my time at CRT or Farmland, so it was post Microsoft. But the 4 years I spent at Microsoft were echoing your comments earlier. The enormity of the expertise that's there is just mind blowing,
Yeah.
right? And actually, little old New Zealand, Microsoft New Zealand, punched well above its weight, which isn't
Hell yeah.
unusual for New
Yep.
Zealand and in a lot
Yep.
of the endeavours we do, right? And even just recently, the Aware Group is someone that's working for us, partnering with us at Silverfern Farms, but they're doing great things on the global stage for Microsoft.
Yeah. Out of
Um,
Hamilton.
yeah, out
Amazing.
of Hamilton, that's my old stomping ground too. The Tron, you can
The
take the
boy out of
boy
the
out of the
Tron.
Waikato, but you can't
Yeah.
take the Waikato out of the boy. Hey, a little birdie told me you might have had a rather, I'm not going to say regretful, but there I did, experience where you stumbled into the meeting of a CEO in Seattle at some point. Is this something
Oh,
that you recall? The
I don't know. I've stumbled into all. There's, there's a few things
mi-
I would never confess
micro,
to.
the Microsoft CEO doing a
Oh no, actually no. In fact, in my defence, I know the event to which that you are referencing. And no, all I did was I was at a very large dinner, literally in a room with 5,000 people, and I dragged my chair back to get up and go to the men's room and smashed it into the back of Bill Gates's chair. But I was not the guy who had far too many drinks and had to dash to the men's room to get rid of his dinner and all the drinks, who ran slap bang into Bill G, knocked him to the ground beside his two bodyguards, and then made the momentary decision whether to stop and apologise and run, and decided to do the latter. That was not me, but I do know who that was. So if you're watching this,
it was probably the individual that was telling me the story about
actually,
you.
it might be. It could be. After we'll have that conversation afterwards. I know exactly who it was.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Don't want to let too many secrets out. There was some, certainly back in the day, there was some great events and things that put out like those experiences for me are as much a joy as working and doing all the customer stuff we did, on the ground in New Zealand.
Oh man, we had some good fun, right? We got to meet some amazing folks. I mean, I sitting in a room with Steve Barmer when I first joined us in the OEM team, and at the time the OEM team was 1% of the headcount and a third of the company's profit, right? There was only 200 of us or something. We got treated pretty well. Sitting in a room with Steve Barmer, dreadfully hungover. That was me, not Steve. And I arrived late, so I was in the front row, and he was literally 8 feet in front of me, yelling and in a good way, enthusiastic way for probably the better part of 2 hours. And I was just sitting there thinking, oh my God, I hope I don't throw up. I hope I don't throw up. But getting to see those folks up close and talk to them. And in fact, I had a meeting years back at the Hilton in Auckland that I sat next to Steve B. We were talking to Weta about doing some very, very cool stuff. And so I got to see him in a real business sense. Like we were, and this, I don't think this is so many years ago, it doesn't matter. We were talking about using the Xbox Live network to render the next King Kong movie, I think it was. Right? So distribute it. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing, right? Richard Taylor. So Richard Taylor was in the room, Steve Barmer, myself, and watching a guy like Steve B up close. And most of what everyone else in the world gets to see of Steve is, developers, and jumping around on stage and all that sort of thing. The brain on that guy and the ability to connect with the other folks in the room and understand what they were trying to do, get his points across, listen to them. It was just a masterclass in leadership. Just an absolutely incredible guy.
Yeah. Look, and I didn't experience him that close up. My first couple of events in the US, Bill Gates was doing basically his final kind of speaking to staff before he transitioned out, and just to observe those things even from 50 feet, there's leadership lessons in there. Look, I think Microsoft as an organisation is quite different today than when you and I were there, and that's examples of leadership.
I met bad leaders too. I've had no names, no pack drill, but I met one of the direct reports to the chief executive at one stage, who was one of the most unimpressive human beings I've ever met in my life. Cold, completely non-empathetic. It reminded me very strongly of Mr. Burns on The Simpsons, actually. Also appearance-wise, which might give some of it away. But just... it was interesting what a chalk and cheese thing it was compared to some of the other folks that I got to meet while I was there. But learning experience.
It's a learning experience as you can see what not to do, right? As you kind of navigate these things, right? So in that context, you're talking to your 25-year-old self again, proffering some advice. What would be the top thing that you would say? This is something you've got to avoid doing at all costs?
Well, gee, that's a good question. I might flip that round or do a bit of mental gymnastics on that. I think if it had to be in that sort of context of avoid at all costs, is doubting yourself. I'm a pretty self-doubting kind of guy, certainly have been in the past, maybe not quite as much now. Maybe I care less about whether what others think of me, right? And that's another thing I think as you get older and grumpier, I think worrying about what others think of you becomes less important. But just kind of backing myself, it took me a while to realize that there were some things I was kind of okay at, good at, and I wish I had worked those things out 10 years earlier. That it wasn't like I got instantaneously good at them one day. I'd kind of been getting good at them for a while, but it took me a long time before I was willing to kind of look myself in the eye and go, actually, you know what? You don't suck at this. So I can't even say I'm good at something. It's
Yeah,
So it's kind of that, that whole thing, being kind to yourself, and again, I think that's one of the great things about when you get to meet the likes of Steve and Bill and some of those folks. They're just humans, right?
yeah,
They're demigods from a business perspective, but they're just humans, and they've got challenges and other bits and pieces as well. Um, and yeah, it's not like that there's some magical thing that they drink or are injected with that makes them into these superhuman folks. They're just, they've got a bunch of traits and things they've inherited and things they've learned, and they've worked out how to focus that in an effective manner. So I think just that whole thing of understanding that your diversity is as of much value as anyone else's, right?
yeah.
And has as much power to make the world a better place, right? Make people better, help them.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and it's sort of having the confidence to voice that.
Yeah,
You brought up, or you mentioned the imposter syndrome. I shared a video on YouTube a few months back or a few weeks back about that, and the constant struggle that I've had. And to talk about it is a little bit cathartic, but also to recognise that heaps of people, I'd
everyone's
argue
got
to
it,
say
mate.
everyone fucking has it to
Yeah,
some
yeah,
degree with some situation they're in, right?
yep,
Some techniques I use to help me get past that is, and I've used it with, I know I can recall the conversations just recently where you only have to be 10 minutes ahead of the other people in the room to help get momentum.
yep,
Excuse me. It doesn't, and you don't have to be um, the Rhodes Scholar to make a
correct.
difference, right?
That's exact. And again, look, it's this journey thing. While I was working in the Kiwi SaaS team, we talked all the time about software as a service companies, right? SaaS companies,
Yeah,
and how if we could find a way to help those earlier in the journey connect with those later in the journey to avoid those potholes and landmines that I was talking about before, um, that would mean that they could move more quickly. If they could move more quickly, they might apply, their capital more effectively and efficiently. It might mean that they wouldn't make the same platform strategy decision mistakes that someone ahead of them had. All of those things, you didn't have to be a million miles ahead, but just connecting folks that were a little bit ahead with those with a little bit behind. And I saw it close up enough and often enough from a Kiwi SaaS perspective to know that works. It really does work. And I think anything, getting my hobby horse for a second, but anything we can do in New Zealand to stop companies starting and then going through the cycle of making all the same stupid
yeah,
freaking mistakes that everyone else before them has made, so that they can get to the next stage faster, slightly less battle scarred, and more ready for the next step. Has to be a good thing. And to be honest, we're not good at that in New Zealand. Everyone kind of starts out, goes through the same thing. 90% of startups fail, and it's kind of like maybe if we could make that 80%, um, that would be a good thing.
yeah. I'm gonna come back to that, but I'm just gonna step back a little bit in terms of the dialogue we just shared around 10 minutes ahead, 30 minutes ahead to avoid those things. I think one piece of advice that I would offer my 25-year-old self would be identify people that are that far ahead. You might have bigger, bolder, more aspirations,
Yep.
but you've got to go through those other stages first. And so, if you went and asked the person or the that you aspire to be how they got there, they probably couldn't answer it.
Yep.
But if you went and saw someone that was 10 minutes ahead, they'd go, "Oh, you just do A, B," and it'd be much easier for you.
Yep.
So be looking for those opportunities, and
That's a
even
good point. Ask.
yeah, well, ask
That's
because
right. Yep.
earlier, if you don't ask, you don't get,
That's it.
right? So
Exactly right.
it's important, and it takes bravery, it takes courage. We were in Wanaka over the weekend, and I tried a little experiment to my wife's. She's like, "What's he doing?" We were in a shop, and the woman there, she was lovely. She got talking, and oh, where are you from? I'm from Dunedin. Oh, my son's at university in Dunedin, and I'm like, oh, so what's he studying? He's doing computer science, second year. I said, oh, fancy that. I'm in IT. I've been doing this 30 years. I'm part of the team at Silverfern Farms. can I give you my name and number because we take on grads
Yep.
occasionally that, are worth their salt. I think she was kind of like, oh, what? And I just wrote it down, and
Yeah.
it was for no other reason that the conversation happened and a couple of questions got asked, right? If the guy, Romy, reaches out, all well and good. If he doesn't,
Yep.
no skin off my nose, but
Yep.
that's the sort of opportunity that people need to be looking for to take as well. Not me just standing there offering my
Actually,
help, but
yeah. That, and you raised a good point there too, which I think it took me a long time to click to. So maybe one of the things I tell my 25-year-old self is to explain the power of a network and willingness to open that up to others and connect people up. And I seem to spend these days half of my life sending emails that go, A meet B, B meet A. Hey, you should talk about blah blah blah. I'll leave it to you to figure out what to do from here, right? And I've had so many good results from that. Just, sometimes people ask, sometimes I can see a connection, sometimes there'll be something going on, and I'll go, oh yeah, I can help there. But that whole thing of your network is yours. It doesn't belong to your employer. It's yours. You build it
yeah,
over time, and use it. Both for your own benefit, but actually for the benefit of others. That whole 2 degrees of separation thing. There's nothing. That's 100% correct in New Zealand, and it is worldwide now with things like LinkedIn. And man, I've connected folks all over the globe, and what's it cost me? Zero. The benefit to them is tangible. I think I wish I'd have worked that out earlier. The power of a network took me a little while to figure that out.
well, like in our defence, Brett, we've got a few grey hairs. The ability to network and as easy as it is now with
Yeah,
tools like LinkedIn and that, wasn't afforded to us early in our career, but
yeah,
um, it's still held true, right? Even in that physical sense, I remember my first couple of jobs were sales, right? And if you didn't have a network, you were on a hiding to nothing,
yep.
and you had to leverage it, right? And it's not about gratuitous favor seeking or anything like that. It's just you return what you get as well,
Oh, mate,
right?
it's a
So it's
karma thing.
it's a it's a
It's
double sided coin, right?
correct. It's community karma, right? Just doing the right thing. It'll come back to you one day. But
Yeah,
just sometimes. And I mean, it was interesting again going back to when I was doing the KiwiSat stuff. Um, there was several times where I was working with quite small startups who I thought had something quite cool. Right? There's lots of them. There's can't remember how many, close to 800 or 900, I think, companies in the community all up. But you come across someone doing something pretty darn cool. It's like, you have that aha moment. And I was able to connect some of those folks with people that have been there and done that. Some pretty well known
yeah,
people in the tech space in New Zealand. And every one of those people accepted the email, accepted the call, whatever it was, right? No one ever told me to stop doing this.
yeah,
They were willing to go and help. So yeah, it's powerful, right? The folks I was helping or doing it for didn't have the connections, might not have felt brave enough or in a good enough position to go and do that for themselves. Um, and so what I worked out a while back was this idea of delegated trust. It's kind of the people that I was connecting had some trust in me, and the folks that I was trying to connect them with had some trust in me. So there was kind
yeah,
of that, well, if Brett says I should talk to this person, maybe I should talk to this person. And I'm careful not to abuse that, and I'm careful to, screen people very carefully. I've had a couple, I've had a couple of very bad things go, or things go very badly off the rails. Oh my God, there was one a year or two back that was spectacular. But 99.9% of the time, it's worked out perfectly. And the ones where they haven't are just good reminders to how important it is to do the vetting properly.
yeah. Do your diligence. I mean, that
Yep.
kind of lessons hard earned are sometimes
Yeah.
our best teachers, right? So it is important to be appreciating those things they afford you. Like when I moved down to Dunedin, it was not for career. I had met someone through the opportunity that Microsoft afforded me to travel, and well, my wife Leslie came into the room and at the back of a tech head presentation, and
Oh yeah.
That's it. The
Oh, I
story's
didn't know
over.
that. Hey.
We met through that. So
Yep.
there is a funny twist to that. It was because she worked for Nigel, who is a peer of mine at Sawfern Farms now, and CIA had sent her to Auckland to come to a techie event, and now
See, I
Nigel
told
and
you
I
it was a
are,
small world.
two feckin' degrees, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And like, but there's truth in that. Like Nigel and I developed a good relationship outside of work because we were both doing CrossFit and that. I didn't even we probably didn't really know what each other did at work, but that the strength of that relationship and the network, and that that's landed me where I am. I've a lot to
Yep.
thank for the network that Microsoft helped me build. If I'd landed in Dunedin without that, it would have been that much more
Yep.
difficult. And I've
Yep.
had other people come down here and experience it, and it is difficult. You think the Auckland market is quite different. Wellington market is different
Yep.
again. Down here's a bit more insular, if you like,
Yep.
which is kind of an interesting spin on that, Brett, is if these networks are important, and what energy are you putting in to maintain that human connections to build stronger ones, particularly in the context of digital and technology and all that stuff that's afforded to us these days?
Um, I do my very best, and I've actually been a bit slack on it for the last probably 2, 3, 4 months after buying this business and things. Just been head down, tail up, and that. But I drink a lot of coffee with people, right, and literally just
Yeah.
catching up over coffee and keeping networks warm. And there are a bunch of people right now, probably about 20 people I owe coffees to that want to catch up, and I've been extremely slack, so I need to get my proverbial together and get that sorted out. Obviously, social media makes some of that stuff easier, and I stay in contact with people via the various social media things. Yeah, and I guess it's that classic thing of it's a bit like friendships, right? There's folks that I've had working relationships with who I haven't seen for years, and we could sit down over coffee and it would be like that. We'd be chatting again. It's just
Yeah.
So I think it's that. I think it's keeping things warm. Even just seeing folks. I spend a bit of time on Twitter rabbiting on about bits and pieces. People see me. You kind of keep a low level presence, I guess you could describe it as.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and again, I like people. I like talking to people. I like sitting over a beer or a coffee and just shooting the shit and just figuring out, understanding what people are up to and what's going on. And I like to think, because it's genuine, I like to think people see that I'm interested in them. Right? It's not a superficial
Yeah.
kind of thing. I've never, I don't think, ever had conversations with folks with a specific goal. I'm going to talk to this person and go, and that's not my style. Lots of other people like that, and that's perfectly okay. But it's not me. I just like
Yeah.
chatting with folks and connecting and kind of finding out what's going on in their heads and in their world, and other stuff comes from that.
Yeah, like no hidden agendas. There's
Yeah,
just there's a mutual respect and understanding that what is it, quid pro quo, whatever,
yeah,
in terms of that relationship, right? It's
yeah,
important, and it takes a bit like you have to be intentional in how you invest. I think that's really important, but you don't invest with a hidden agenda or something that yeah, people pick that up from a mile off,
yeah,
right?
yeah. They do, and yeah, 100%. And I've said to people many times over the years, I have the brain power for politics. Um, so I'm not a political. I just like folks, and I just arrive. I bring me. I'm pretty well qualified to be me. That's who turns up. There aren't hidden agendas or any of that stuff. We talk all over the place. Anyone that knows me will tell you I could be a pretty random conversationalist. Um, but I think people go away feeling that they've been heard, listened to, understood. I've given, of me if they've asked for my views on things, and yeah, I don't know. It's just I think I've worked with folks in the past who are those type A, pretty. In fact, I've worked with one or two corporate psychopaths in the past who have to fake that, right? In fact, I have worked with at least one genuine corporate psychopath,
Yeah.
and watching how those folks operate, where they have to fake it, right? It's not within
Yeah.
them. Everything they do to be, connect with humans, everything, it just isn't them. And it's like they wear a cloak and they struggle to keep that cloak on and keep all that stuff hidden, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I struggle to reconcile having to do that, right? In terms of, yeah, it doesn't. I don't know how they manage it. It would
yeah,
be
most of them
there's
don't. Most of
obvious,
them get to see what's underneath at some point, right? But the
yeah,
good thing is, I literally have said, I might have worked with one or two or three of those folks. I've
yeah,
worked with hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, and honestly, the vast majority of them are just darn good human beings that I've thoroughly enjoyed working with, that I've learned a huge amount from, that have given of themselves when I've asked them. And so my general view of humanity is the vast majority are really good folks. There's a few
yeah.
dickheads that spoil it for everyone, but most people are good people, right?
Well, that's right, and having as kind of bring back to the notion of the new leader, the new manager, whatever, and having the courage to ask, because people are
Yeah,
more than willing to share their experience.
yeah, they are.
The I find the best thing you can get out of a conversation, people will share, right? They love talking about
Yeah,
themselves, generally
yep,
speaking, right?
exactly right.
And if it's helpful, then that's really good, right? And there's an opportunity that you get to do that later for others as well.
Exactly.
Look, the last thing I kind of just wanted to touch on, because for me um, it's a big part of why I got into management all those years ago, and leading and focusing on it, is the notion of well-being and mental health, and the the whole person is so much more relevant today than what it was, certainly when I first became a manager. I had
Yep.
um, someone share some sage advice to me in my first management role. You can't be friends with your team. And I'm like, what, I was like 32 going, what is this dude talking about? Because I just, like, how can you not be?
Yeah.
And it doesn't, the definition of friend isn't living in each other's hip pocket,
Yeah. That's right.
100% of the time. But what's your thoughts on that in terms of how you? I think I know the answer, but
Yeah. Look,
I'm just interested to explore that with you a bit.
yeah, look, I think so. I think that whole the well-being thing is critical, right? And we spend a huge amount of our time at work, and work can have very much have the potential for damaging well-being, right? Stress and all the other things that happen. So and to their credit, most organisations, in fact, the vast majority of organisations these days understand that, recognise that, and actually do things about it. Every
Yeah,
organisation worth its salt has an EAP, employee assistance program. They think about culture, they think about diversity and inclusion, and all of that sort of stuff. So I think that's a good thing. Um, can you be friends with your team? Well, the if that's not true, then what it means is you should be unfriendly with your team. And I just think that's completely wrong. I mean, I made some of the best friendships of my lifetime um, in the workplace with folks, right?
yeah,
The fact that you and I are chatting now, right? That folks that I worked with years and years ago that I still stay connected with, um, because I think that whole thing of shared experiences and shared battles and that
yeah,
type of thing. That humans are wired for that. We are, we build, it's like going to the RSA and all those folks that were in Vietnam together or whatever, that are still, you know, um, connected in some way. They shared something. So, yeah, look, I think bringing humanity to work is the key thing. And again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think it's difficult to do that if you're in a situation where it's not psychologically safe, where people feel they can't
yeah,
do that. And so, and I've worked with and know people, and I'll be honest, being guilty of this myself early on, of kind of having a work personality and a life personality.
yeah,
And it was probably the job that I had, the company I worked for prior to Microsoft. I was there for about 7 years or so, 6, 7 years, no, 4 or 5 years. Where my life personality was welcomed into the thing, and I realised that I could be me,
Yeah.
And that was quite life changing for me, And I think anyone that worked with me at Microsoft would tell you that I kind of brought me to the party, and that it
Yeah.
was good most of the time, and occasionally not so good. Um, but that genuineness and authenticity, and being you, and man, I've worked with folks over the years that just are the most magical humans, because when they come to work, they are them. They're not trying to be a something else. They're not putting that cloak on. They're not putting on a costume. They're being them. And I think that's good for everybody involved. It's certainly good for them, because I think if you're trying to, my eldest son said something to be quite profound quite a few years ago. He said, I've got friends that have an Instagram personality, they have a Facebook personality, they have a Twitter personality, they have a work personality, they have a go to the pub personality, and I don't know how they manage them all. And it really struck with me how we are in this world where people feel that they have to, they're kind of actors in their own stage show, right?
Yeah.
It's so much easier when you're just you, So this is me, for better or for worse. Sometimes I bring my not as professional as I could possibly be self to work, but I also, by the same measure, don't bring my laser focused work personality home most of the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I wrestled a little bit with my identity being wrapped up in my job early
Oh
in
yeah,
my
we've all been
career
there and
and
done that, mate.
all of those things. And it comes with pain, that and trying to be yourself and bring that authenticness to it. You
Yeah,
have to let go of that stuff. It's not your job. Your job is something you do, and
yeah,
you can be really really good at it, and all of those things. But it is about being balanced. And I guess as you get a bit older, those things are lessons hard earned. To be fair,
yeah.
and if there's anything that you can do early in your career to kind of establish those just ways of being, it's really important. That's something that I'd highly encourage people to be focused on.
Yeah, and I think that if going back to what we were talking about earlier, if I was going to go back and talk to my 25-year-old self, I'd probably go and tell him to be less shy and retiring. Right? I was a pretty shy, quiet, sit there and just wait for the vibe of the room, kind of guy, believe it or
Yeah.
not. And over time, I kind of stepped out of that shell. I watched my eldest son operate. He's a civil engineer, and when he was at university, he would be the person that would be leading the group projects, and he was always more front-footed than I was, and more at his age, and
Mm.
willing to get out there and be vulnerable, right?
Mm.
Um, and he's quite a gregarious guy. He gets out there, he's happy to do presentations. He can deal with conflict in the workplace. 20 years younger than 15, 20 years younger than me when I'd kind of figured those things out. So
Mm.
I think that whole thing of there's only one thing in life that's going to kill you, right? And it's probably not stuff that happens at work, hopefully, although it does happen terribly in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Um, you getting out there and just being a little bit braver, or being a little bit more vulnerable, or a little bit more willing to for something not to quite go right, or for someone to not see you in the perfectly sculpted way that you want to be seen, as a means of you being, authentic and you, and bringing yourself. I think that's a good thing, and I think a little bit of that every day makes people better.
Yeah, and look, I think in the context of leadership, we're beholden as leaders to live those examples too,
Yeah,
and hold yourself to those kind of behaviours. You can't be perfect,
yeah,
and anyone that says they are is lying to you, right? And it comes across fairly obvious in short order. But yeah, it's a rewarding endeavour, leadership. Don't take the privilege lightly
yeah.
either. I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a really good point.
and technology is I fundamentally believe, although I'm a rabid technologist, this stuff is presenting us with more challenges, as just as companies and as individuals, and as humanity moves forward. There's shit I've just unpicked a whole series of podcasts in that 30 seconds of talk, right?
Yeah,
But um, look, I didn't think we'd get anywhere near an hour. Actually, I was bullshitting because I knew we'd get there, because
mate,
I
you and
know
I
I
could talk
know
for
both
10 hours.
of
You
us.
know that.
But I think to wrap it up would be really good. Once again, appreciate having you on air with me. I know you've done some more prestigious podcasts.
I don't know. I've done a lot of podcasts, but yeah. Paul Spain, it's kind of
Paul,
prestigious.
the
Yeah.
New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm not there yet. Paul, I'm coming for you, mate. You could interview me. But any last thoughts for the audience that is building? I'm sure in the background and
Tens of thousands. Last thoughts. I don't know. I just go back to the be human thing. I think if you want to be a leader, step into leadership, make it a conscious decision. Be curious, be willing to learn, understand that you'll make mistakes, and don't beat yourself to death over them. Learn how to take feedback and learn how to give feedback. Just be a good human, and understand that everyone has a story. Everyone there's stuff going on in their world. I think just operate and interact in the way in which you would like others to operate and interact with you. Do unto others. Let's end on a biblical note.
Absolutely, I couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks again, and
thanks, man.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next show in a fortnight's time.
Thanks, mate.